Heavyweight US Senator Lindsey has suddenly died of a heart attack.
He was also widely known across Washington's political circles as one of the toughest anti-CCP hawks around. He'd repeatedly and publicly called out the Chinese Communist Party's serious human rights abuses, including multiple allegations of forced organ harvesting, and he'd pushed through several bills sanctioning Beijing.
The Global Times even ran a piece titled Farewell Graham. He was the same age as former Premier Li Keqiang and died in eerily similar circumstances, so his sudden death has sparked all kinds of speculation among Chinese communities.
Back under Jiang Zemin, assassination orders reportedly went out through Zhongqing Hong targeting Falun Gong founder Master Li Hongzhi, and a special task force was set up for it. The CCP really is still harassing and intimidating dissidents overseas.
Across the whole country this year, the US has caught 113 foreign spies, 62 of them confirmed to be from China.
The CCP's overseas infiltration, surveillance and transnational repression have been proven again and again by US court cases. Beijing is waging a war without gunsmoke.
The network they've built inside America these past few years has long stopped targeting just Chinese people. It's burrowed into the US executive branch, the judiciary, even the media. The US government is now investigating every single one of these fronts in full.
Hi everyone, welcome to PinnacleView. I'm Xuan. Last Saturday night, heavyweight Senator Lindsey suddenly died of a heart attack. It sent shockwaves through American politics, and it's fueled a lot of speculation and suspicion about some kind of foreign political conspiracy. The FBI quickly announced it would help with the investigation, and that statement alone only fueled the conspiracy talk even further. Graham's cause of death is strikingly similar to that of former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, so his sudden death has triggered all sorts of comparisons among Chinese communities. In fact, the CCP has been steadily ramping up both open and covert operations across the United States and other Western countries alike, and this has triggered a fierce growing backlash from many nations around the world. In just the first half of 2026 alone, the US has already taken down 62 Chinese spies. All of this points to a new kind of warfare on the horizon, one that may not necessarily be fought on a traditional battlefield at all. With me in the studio today, as always, our senior media professional Ms. Guo and independent producer Li Jun. Before we get into today's show, let me tell you a bit more about Puritang's Xuanbao Black Ginseng. One customer, a Chinese American, learned that his elderly mother's health had taken a serious turn for the worse, and he rushed back to China right away to be by her side. Every single day, he had her drink 2 packets of Puritang's Black Ginseng liquid, made using the traditional method of being steamed and sun-dried 9 times over. Her energy noticeably picked up in no time at all. Her strength and her stamina for everyday activities both improved a great deal. Now she's not only able to get out and about normally, she's regularly out walking and exercising too. Her whole family was absolutely thrilled, and they even wrote into Puritang to share their feedback. There's also a customer who had gone through colon cancer surgery. As you'd expect, his body was still quite weak afterward. He'd even shiver with cold right after taking a shower. But after sticking with Puritang's Black Ginseng products for a while, he reported a huge improvement. His appetite and his energy were both far better than they'd been before. His friends noticed just how well he'd recovered. You'd honestly never guess he'd just been through major surgery. We hear feedback like this all the time. If your energy reserves are running low, a deep tune-up with genuinely top-grade black ginseng can leave you feeling like a new person. If you're thinking about buying Puritang's Black Ginseng products right now, remember to enter our exclusive PinnacleView promo code JYLT at checkout. Those letters are the initials of our show's Chinese name, and you'll get free worldwide shipping on your order. There's another great deal too. It's a spend and get gift offer. Spend $500 and you'll get a free whole black ginseng root as a gift. Spend $3,000 and they'll throw in an extra top grade root as well. This is honestly a pretty rare deal, so don't miss it. If you need it, don't miss this chance. Deals like this, exclusive one, don't come around often. And once again, we really want to thank all of you for your continued support of our show, PinnacleView. All right, Li Jun, Lindsey Graham's sudden death has really sent shockwaves through Washington and beyond. A lot of people are quite suspicious about the actual cause of his death, about just how suddenly and unexpectedly he passed away.
Graham died on the night of July 11th at around 8:30 in the evening. Someone in Washington called 911. It was cardiac arrest. Paramedics arrived on the scene and pronounced him dead right there. He was 71 years old, and he had no publicly known major health issues beforehand. Just the week before, he'd attended the Beijing Olympics, then flown straight to Ukraine, where he met with Zelensky in Kyiv and toured a drone facility. He was even scheduled to appear on NBC that following Sunday, but in the end, the segment had to be cancelled at the very last minute. Trump posted a tribute to him on social media, calling Graham one of the greatest men he'd ever known and one of the greatest senators too, hardworking, a true American patriot, and said he would miss him enormously. The White House even lowered its flags to half-staff in his honor. On NBC, Trump also mentioned that Graham had called him Saturday night right after getting back from Ukraine, sounding a little forgetful, a little tired, but otherwise seeming just fine. So he said he found it hard to believe and that it was all just very strange, plain and simple. What's drawn even more attention is how the FBI responded. FBI Director Kash Patel posted on X Sunday morning saying the Bureau was assisting local authorities and providing every resource necessary. After that statement came out, the doubts started piling up pretty fast. A number of conservative commentators and media figures publicly said they didn't buy it at all, and they're demanding a full and thorough investigation. On the medical side of things, Russian medical authorities have now preliminarily determined that the cause was cardiovascular disease, brought on specifically by a tear in the aorta. Officials say they found no sign of foul play so far, but the FBI has already gotten involved regardless. And given that Graham chaired the Senate Budget Committee, was a heavyweight hawk on China and on foreign policy generally, and was such a key ally of Trump's, these doubts just keep fermenting away in Washington and across conservative media circles.
Right, and I saw that the media caught up with Trump almost immediately on this. He said it was a very strange thing indeed, genuinely strange in his own words. But how exactly you choose to read that word strange is really up for debate, isn't it, when you think about it? And you know, Lindsey Graham was and remains a pretty pivotal figure in the Senate right now, because right now the key issue at hand is the Safe America Act. He was apparently a key player behind that bill, right? In the hours before he died, when he called Trump on the phone, they were mainly discussing that very piece of legislation. And what exactly does this bill include? Well, it requires voters to show ID at the polls. Photo ID specifically, because a lot of places right now don't even require you to verify your identity to vote, which is a pretty bizarre thing when you think about it. And the midterms are coming up this November, so don't you think the timing here is awfully sensitive? Right, exactly. So, Liege 1, why do you think so many people suspect foreign involvement here? The suspicion really is that someone deliberately did this. It's not necessarily quite like what that female commentator suggested, where she said, look, we know it was cardiac arrest, but the real question is, why did his heart actually stop? That's the question that's got so many people suspicious, isn't it, really?
That's because Graham, we should say, was one of the most steadfast foreign policy hawks in the entire Congress, and that was especially true when it came to backing both Ukraine and Israel. He long pushed Congress to pass military aid bills for Ukraine, and he consistently argued for sending more heavy weapons and continuing that support over time. And just this July, he'd attended the NATO summit, then flown personally to Kyiv to meet Zelensky and tour Ukraine's drone facilities. President Zelensky has said publicly more than once that Graham was Ukraine's most steadfast friend and reliable ally, and expressed deep gratitude for his work pushing that aid through Congress. Graham died suddenly less than 24 hours after returning from that trip.
You know, the CCP's attitude here is actually pretty similar to Iran's. The Global Times even ran a piece titled Farewell Graham, kind of in that old farewell Stilwell style, the way they've said farewell to various other figures before, including Trump. Basically what they meant was, this was a man who'd long backed Taiwan and backed Taiwan's military buildup, and now that he's gone, they're essentially thrilled about it, and they made that pretty clear too, you know?
Right, Graham, during his lifetime, was chairman of the Senate Rules Committee and was arguably Trump's single most important ally in the chamber. The problem is he'd also made enemies of both Iran and the CCP at the same time, and those factors are exactly why suspicion of foreign involvement has genuinely persisted in Washington and among conservatives. Simply put, Some people suspect Graham's death is tied to a foreign hand because as a staunch supporter of both Ukraine and Israel, and as a harsh critic of the CCP, he had drawn open threats and fierce attacks from both of those forces over the years.
So do you think this ties back to the CCP?
It's not that there's absolutely zero connection, but right now, the mainstream direction of suspicion in the West is actually different from what Wall Street's been focused on. The mainstream view among Western media and political circles still treats Graham's death as a sudden illness, plain and simple. Some conservatives, though, do think there's a real possibility of foreign involvement, but they're mostly pointing at Iran and Russia. Very few people are actually pointing the finger at the CCP, because after all, even though Graham was a hardline anti-CCP figure who'd repeatedly criticized China's human rights record and pushed for sanctions, his final trip and his most direct confrontations were really centered on Ukraine and Iran instead. Still, within overseas Chinese communities, quite a lot of people are talking about this, and they're even comparing it to Li Keqiang's death, since the two men died at a remarkably similar age. Born the same year, both died suddenly, and both deaths were heart-related. When Li Keqiang died suddenly in October 2023, officials also called it a sudden illness. Graham, this time, suffered a sudden heart attack at home last Saturday night, and efforts to save him failed. Seeing the timing, the age, the circumstances of death, a lot of Chinese people naturally started connecting the dots.
Right. Of course, some people online are calling him America's Li Keqiang, with everything that implies. But I actually want to ask Ms. Guo about this. The CCP obviously has plenty of agents operating overseas. Everyone already knows that much. I remember that years ago, some people inside China once told me that the CCP actually has a rule against carrying out assassinations abroad. They'll buy people off, gather intelligence, strike at you in other quieter ways, but they supposedly don't go as far as assassination. Do you think that's still accurate as far as you understand it? Or has that changed?
That used to be true, yes. The CCP runs surveillance, infiltration, intimidation abroad, everyone knows that. But directly targeting a person, 20 plus years ago, that was genuinely rare. The international backlash was too costly if they got caught. But over these last 20 years, things have been changing. There's a story that circulates in overseas pro-democracy circles that the CCP's methods against key overseas figures have gotten more covert, mainly poisoning, so the cause of death looks like a natural illness, hard to trace, hard to prove. And here's the key thing, the CCP's targets usually aren't the most famous front and centre figures, because if something happens to them, the whole world's media will be watching, which exposes them. So who they really target are people who play a key role inside an organisation, but aren't well known, and even if something happens to them, outside attention stays limited, and it's easy to quietly bury. Over the past 10 years, there have been a few cases in pro-democracy circles that really do seem bizarre. The first is Zhang Jian, exiled in France. People may remember him from 1989. He was a student at Tiananmen Square, commander of the student marshals, shot through the thigh by martial law troops. That bullet stayed lodged in his body for almost 20 years until he finally had it removed in Paris. Living proof, hard evidence of the June 4th massacre. Then in 2019, on a flight from Bangkok back to Paris, Zhang Jian suddenly fell seriously ill. The plane made an emergency landing in Germany and he was rushed to the hospital, but in the end he couldn't be saved. He was only 48 years old. Before that, it had emerged that he'd actually gone missing in Thailand for a while. His whereabouts a complete mystery, and by the time word finally got out, it was already the worst possible news. The man was already gone. Pro-democracy activists at the time called out the strange disappearance and demanded that both France and Thailand investigate his death as a possible murder case, given just how many red flags there were surrounding it. The second such case is Hua Yong, a painter exiled in Canada, no ordinary figure either. On a June 4th anniversary, he actually wrote the characters for 6-4 twice at Tiananmen Square, using his own blood to do it. There's a very famous photo of it. You know, that's the one he wrote. Later, because he documented Beijing's Kaichi-led purge of the so-called low-end population, he angered the authorities and was forced into exile, drifting through Thailand before reaching Canada in 2021 to seek asylum. In Canada, he was also a skilled kayaker who often paddled out to sea. Then one night in November 2022, he paddled out alone and never came back home. A few days later, rescuers found his body washed up on the shore, confirmed drowned. But people find that really hard to swallow. A kayaker that's skilled just doesn't drown that easily, not normally. What's even more chilling is that late last year, an informant who claimed to have spent 15 years working for the CCP's secret police gave a public interview in Australia. And I watched that interview myself too. He said he'd been assigned specifically to keep tabs on and surveil Huayong. And a former Chinese judge in a separate interview said it outright. This looks like a very carefully planned murder because they understand exactly how the CCP operates in these situations. They fake accidents in order to kill people. Canada's own former ambassador to China even said at the time that no possibility whatsoever should be ruled out.
Actually, both overseas pro-democracy circles and Falun Gong practitioners alike have had these baffling cases of sudden, unexplained deaths from supposed illness. One of them was a man named Zhang Mengye, a retired teacher from the Guangzhou Institute of Electronic Technology and a college classmate of Hu Jintao's back at Tsinghua University. Back in 2025, because he practiced Falun Gong, both he and his wife ended up being persecuted for it, and he spent a very long time on the run before eventually making it all the way to Thailand. On September 1st, 2006, he was on his way to the park to practice, just as he did every single morning, when a car suddenly swerved out of nowhere and struck him, and he was taken to a private hospital nearby. I actually asked some Falun Gong practitioners about this at the time, and they told me that the injuries from the collision weren't even all that serious. He could still talk, was fully conscious, and seemed basically fine at first. But then, later on, he died mysteriously inside the hospital. His family found so many troubling red flags that they became convinced this was absolutely no ordinary death. You know, just about a week before this whole thing happened, the Epoch Times had actually run an interview with him in which he talked about his college days alongside Hu Jintao and Liu Yongqing, Liu being Hu's wife, and their shared time together back at university. And he went on to say, he talked about what Hu Jintao was really like back in college. Before the incident, he told local Falun Gong practitioners he suspected there was an informant among the people close to him. And just a couple of weeks before it happened, the UN Refugee Agency had notified them they'd be resettled to America. The paperwork was already in place.
The paperwork was already done. These past few years, the CCP's infiltration and control of Chinese communities overseas is no longer a guess. It's being proven case by case, verdict by verdict in the US justice system. Just this past week, FBI Director Kash Patel made a high-profile announcement of a counterintelligence win. He said the US has caught 113 foreign spies so far this year, and 62 of them are confirmed to be from China.
What time frame is that?
Recently.
This year, I believe he means 2026, and we're honestly only half a year into it. That's the number for just those 6 months alone.
In other words, Chinese nationals made up over 55% of the total spies caught, meaning on average 1 out of every 2 foreign spies caught these days turns out to be Chinese. And Patel's choice of language there was pretty forceful too. He said this whole series of actions has completely shattered Beijing's covert operations network.
Of course, he can talk it up all he wants, but calling it completely shattered is probably still premature at this stage. Honestly though, US intelligence has genuinely been worried for years now about the large numbers of Chinese nationals who've been crossing illegally through Mexico into the country.
Right. In the past, when US intelligence caught a spy, it was usually handled quietly. A quiet conviction, a quiet deportation. This time, the FBI's broken from that pattern entirely, publicizing these numbers loudly, deliberately sending Beijing a deterrent signal, and at the same time formally telling the American public and Congress that the government is getting serious about national security. Controlling overseas Chinese communities, that's the most sinister move the CCP's been exposed for, the so-called overseas police stations. This was exposed by the human rights group Safeguard Defenders. Their investigation found that Fuzhou's Public Security Bureau in Fujian had announced back in early 2022 that it had set up 30 overseas police service stations worldwide. New York was one of them. The central figure in this particular case is a man named Lu Jianwang, also known as Harry Lu, a US citizen, and the former president of New York's Changle Association. Out of his office at 107 East Broadway, right in Manhattan's Chinatown, there hung yet another banner, this one blue, reading, Fuzhou Police Overseas Service Center, New York, USA. That's exactly how it was written. On the surface, it offered a handful of administrative services, but in reality, it was taking direct orders from the Fuzhou Police, monitoring and harassing dissidents and Falun Gong practitioners who'd been exiled here in America.
Right, the FBI has caught 62 Chinese spies just this year alone, and this New York case was part of that too. I know there was also something involving a People's Liberation Army officer entering the country. He ended up getting caught pretty quickly and thoroughly searched, all because he had concealed his true identity.
He had hidden the fact that he used to be a soldier, and he had also hidden that he was a party member too.
Right, so this is probably something everyone needs to be more alert to right now, because honestly, Chinese people today are in a pretty delicate position. Beyond the CCP itself, especially if you're critical of it, it'll try to suppress you directly. The CCP also uses its intelligence apparatus to go after people in other ways, and a lot of Chinese people living in America are actually caught up in this too, facing suspicion and all sorts of other pressures as a result.
Especially with some of these hometown associations, things that seem harmless. If one of these fellowship groups reaches out and asks you to gather some information, make some contacts, you could end up committing a crime without even realizing it. Overseas Chinese really need to be careful about this.
Right. Overseas Chinese really do need to be careful, and honestly, a lot of Chinese people are already feeling the fallout of this today. Whether you're job hunting or just going about other parts of your life, you might start noticing a lot of subtle changes happening across society now. But do you think the CCP's approach here is mainly targeted at Chinese people specifically? Because non-Chinese people probably aren't nearly as sensitive to this particular issue.
The CCP's methods of infiltrating America are far more complex than we usually imagine. It's not content to just remote control overseas Chinese dissidents. What it really wants is to use money, use NGOs, use American institutions that look like they have nothing to do with China at all to influence American social movements and political issues, even infiltrating government agencies, judicial processes, and the media narrative. That's exactly why Congress and the FBI are now treating this as a full-blown national security issue, because what's at stake has long stopped being just about the Chinese community and is now about the functioning trust and security of the entire American system. So coming back to the point, precisely because the forces pulling the strings behind these networks, the funding, connections and organizations tied to the CCP, Chinese individuals and groups naturally become a highly watched, highly suspected part of the whole investigation, which is a reminder to all of us overseas Chinese. Act with a clear conscience, don't let yourself be used by people with ulterior motives, and don't get dragged into the CCP's wrongdoing. When it comes to standing up to the CCP, the US really has been leading the way. On June 16th this year, the Senate unanimously passed Resolution 444, introduced by Republican Senator Rick Scott. The resolution directly labels the CCP a criminal organization posing a serious threat to global stability and peace, and that's a heavy phrase, because official US documents have usually referred to it as the Chinese government or the People's Republic of China government, at most calling it a strategic competitor. This time, using the words criminal organization goes beyond policy criticism in the language of international politics. It's a moral and legal characterization. It means the CCP's problem isn't just bad policy, but rather that the organization itself is, by its very nature, one that continuously commits major and ongoing criminal activity. Now, this resolution itself isn't actually law, it's simply a resolution, and it carries no enforcement power of its own. But it does explicitly encourage the US government to use every applicable tool available, including the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, to precisely target the officials involved in this persecution, including freezing their assets, denying them visas, and so on. And this passed unanimously, meaning Republicans, Democrats, Conservatives and Liberals in America have all reached a consensus on standing up to the CCP. This hawkish China policy isn't something that flips depending on who's president anymore. It's become institutional momentum. So yes, as you said, America moves first. That's really been the pattern these past few years. On China, the mainstream Western pattern is America sets the tone first with legislation and sanctions, and other Western countries follow suit afterward.
I mean, I remember you telling me about this once after coming back from a trip to the United Nations. You said that whenever you'd bring it up with other countries, they'd tell you, don't talk to us about it, go talk to the Americans about it instead.
They said they all believed in the forced organ harvesting, but America had to move first.
Once America acts, they can follow. On their own, they can't take on the CCP.
Including some German diplomats. Many countries have told me that.
But these past few years, European countries especially have shifted. I know it's not just the US cracking down on CCP overseas police stations lately. Italy, France, Germany, and other European countries are doing it too. France especially has been aggressive. One overseas police station there literally kidnapped someone and was taking them to the airport to be shipped out before police intercepted them. That's basically extraterritorial law enforcement right there, enforcing your own law on foreign soil. That's something the French absolutely will not tolerate. Other countries might turn a blind eye, but not France. You know the CCP's still out there harassing people abroad, mainly through intimidation. That's their go-to method. Li Juan, let me ask you, will there come a day they start using assassination as a routine tactic too?
That's a really key question. The CCP is definitely still harassing and intimidating dissidents abroad, but making assassination a routine tool in the American context, that doesn't look likely right now. It really comes down to a risk and cost calculation. The CCP's usual pattern overseas is to prioritize low-risk, low-cost, deniable methods, harassment, surveillance, threatening family members, economic pressure, using United Front and gangland proxies. Those have long been their tools of choice. In some Southeast Asian countries, though, where local law enforcement is looser or political forces cooperate, you really do see much more extreme cases emerge. Like Zhang Hongbo, founder of the Zhonggong movement, who died in a car crash in Arizona back in 2006. The driver died too, that same day. That case has always been disputed in overseas circles. Some say the crash scene and how it was handled make clear it was no simple accident, that it had to involve CCP intelligence. Overseas outlets like Minghui have also reported that back under Jiang Zemin, assassination orders went out through Zhong Qinghong targeting Falun Gong founder Master Li Hongzhi. A special task force was formed, plotting assassinations in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Canada, including paying gangs large sums to carry them out. But all those operations ultimately failed, and the people involved seemed to meet their own bad ends one after another. Some died, some were hurt, so in the end, it seems they didn't dare touch that approach again. And these days, the CCP probably prefers this kind of grey zone harassment inside America instead. Things like ongoing surveillance, threats, spreading rumours, targeted economic retaliation, and applying pressure through pro-CCP organisations and so on. It's low cost, it's deniable, and it fits their current calculus quite well. Overall, I'd say CCP harassment abroad is going to keep going, but I'd put the odds of them actually using assassination inside the US as still pretty low. The risk is simply too high, and they're just not willing to go there, at least not right now, at this point.
Actually, I think the danger is growing, if anything, not shrinking. And why is that? Because the constraints holding together the CCP's top leadership, this whole authoritarian system, could potentially collapse quite suddenly. And once that collapse happens, a lot of organizations underneath it could start acting in some very strange and unpredictable ways. And that really is the CCP's own regime problem to deal with. So, as everyone already knows by now, Senator Graham's sudden death is genuinely shocking news, and it's bound to spark all sorts of speculation going forward. But until the official findings are actually released, I think we really ought to keep the known facts separate from the political speculation for now. And right now, the medical examiner's preliminary finding is that he died of a cardiac issue, specifically an aortic dissection, with no evidence at all suggesting any outside foul play. What genuinely doesn't need any guessing at all, though, is this. The CCP's overseas infiltration, its surveillance operations, and its transnational repression have all been proven, case after case, in US courts of law. Secret police, proxies using money, community groups, political organizations, all working to influence America. The CCP is waging a war without gun smoke. And for overseas Chinese, this is just the skin we were born in. We're all yellow-skinned, we all speak Chinese, we're all Chinese, so you're already caught up in it, whether you like it or not. I think given all of that, it's all the more important for us to hold the line, legally and morally. We should never do anything on behalf of the CCP and never let ourselves become a tool it uses to hurt free societies. That matters enormously to Chinese people. It's about a future that truly matters. That's all we have time for today. That's all for today. Thanks so much to my guests and to everyone watching.